Welcome to On the Mark with Peter Buckley and Mark O'Donnell. Our podcast is dedicated to helping Christians target the right priorities in their apostolic and interior lives.
Well, hello, and welcome back to On the Mark. I'm Peter Buckley, your host, and joining us again. Thank you, Mark O'Donnell, for being with us and sharing your insights, your wisdom, and your thoughts. Thanks for being with us, Mark.
Yeah, great to be here, Peter. Thank you.
We're continuing along here, rolling along. We're continuing our discussions on how we as Christians can imitate the early Christians in the exercise of our faith. And of course, we're using or have been using over the past couple episodes or sessions the Acts of the Apostles. The first couple of sessions we covered the first four Acts. And I think for this one, we'll focus on chapters 5 and 6. Chapter 5 starts out on a bit of a somber note. It's recounting the story of Ananias and his wife Sapphira. And as they know, they were inspired by, and I guess in a sense wanted to emulate the gestures of their fellow Christian, Barnabas, who is known for his magnanimity. He sold a piece of his land and he gave the entire proceeds to the apostles, to the community. So they, in turn, what do? They sold a piece of their land, land they owned, and they gave a portion of the proceeds to the apostles, but acted in a way that they gave the entire proceeds. So I don't know. I guess some people would say there's some level of generosity there. So what's so bad at that? At least they gave something.
You're correct, Peter. They did give something. Their sin lay in their hypocrisy. They acted as if they were being more generous than they really were. So this dishonesty is a form of gangrene, really, that needed to be cut out of the body of the early church before it could spread. With God, there are no side deals. And that's one thing we learned. We are either for him or against him. We either gather with him or scatter. And that's because God is truth, and he detests the double-minded man or woman. During Jesus' life, he continually calls out hypocrisy of the scribes and Pharisees who say one thing and do another, or who want to appear holier and more devout than they truly are. God has no time for that, and neither should we.
I'm just wondering here, I'm thinking here of proportionality. Does the punishment fit the crime? It seems somewhat severe, doesn't it?
Well, it appears that way at first, but when you envision what the church will become if this type of behavior injects itself into its bloodstream, then it does make sense. Also, it is helpful to reflect that St. Augustine mentions in one of his commentaries that Ananias and Sapphira's punishment was an earthly death, but not necessarily eternal reprobation. Such interventions happen in corporate life as well. In the white paper I wrote, I recounted the episode in which my boss went around me to book $400,000 in revenue we had not yet earned, so he could receive his annual bonus. And when corporate found out, I was going to be fired for that, even though I knew nothing about it. Our parent company was a public company and was almost required to restate its earnings to its shareholders on account of that action. They identified the mistake and took action to cut out the gangrene before it spread within the company. So if corporations can do it, then why can't the church, whose integrity is much more important to maintain? Since we only see the external actions of others and are blind to their interior dimension, we only see part of the story. God knows our hearts, and he knows when we are at the point of falling into danger from which we are unlikely to recover. And that's why we need to constantly struggle to do good. Being consistently truthful is at the core of being good and the best way to live.
I'm wondering, there certainly seems to be a lesson here for us in professional life. I think some will justify prevarication or obfuscation on the grounds of just professional survival. I mean, maybe not even this desire to climb the corporate ladder, but just survive professionally. And why is that? Well, because many of the folks they're either competing with or against are they themselves not fully honest, and they see this, and they see others massaging the truth for own professional advancement. So you can easily see why somebody would justify in a certain way less than ethical actions with a fear that maybe they're handicapping themselves by abiding by such a rigorous standard of truthfulness and veracity.
Well, in the short term, we may lose out, but in the long term, we will win. I mean, not everybody has a right to know the truth. It does not mean we lie to them. It simply means we don't share the truth with them. There are ways we can artfully do this. I mean, if we look at the life of St. Thomas More, we see a man who used jest and humor at times to avoid sharing the truth with those who had no right to it. When things got intense, he simply remained silent rather than lie. In the end, his silence cost him his life. In the process, he became one of the greatest saints of the church. You know, at the highest levels of corporate America, where we've been. I mean, one has to be a highly talented politician to survive and thrive. This requires not only skills and abilities, but also the capacity to communicate effectively. Saying the right thing at the right time in the right place can be critical for success. Doing this while remaining entirely truthful throughout is a challenge, but it's critical for our maintaining our integrity and growing in holiness. And of course, Jesus is the best example. He confounds the Pharisees by telling them to render to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's. That's one of the greatest examples we have of answering truthfully and escaping from an apparently impossible and dangerous situation. So we have to call on Jesus when we feel cornered and don't know what to say.
Really intrigued by what you said about St. Thomas More and his use of humor to avoid sharing the truth. Can you amplify that a bit?
Well, I just think that he would joke with people who were of a lower station than him, but wanted to kind of tell him that they agreed with his position, even though they didn't know it, because he had never articulated it.
Mm-hmm.
So he would just, rather than kind of confront them, he would just kind of joke with them or, and he didn't want to, you don't have to create friction at that level. But also, when he's there with his wife and she's upset because he hasn't opened his heart to her, and he looks at her and he tells her, Alice, let's play, let's play law here.
Mm-hmm.
They call you in, the King of England calls you in, they put your hand on the Bible and they tell you on peril of your immortal soul, has your husband ever said anything about this to you? What are you going to say? And she said,
Mm-hmm.
well, I'm going to say he hasn't.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And so it shall remain. I mean, that's the beauty of it. He doesn't want to put his wife in danger.
Right. That's good. That's good.
So
Getting back to our friend here, Ananias, like a lot of passages in the gospel, this one, again, recounting the experience of Ananias and Sapphira, it seems more complicated upon deeper reflection or consideration than at the first reading. It seems as though some of the lessons we can take from this passage would include seeing beyond the surface. Things may be more complicated, trying to align our lives with the truth and then act accordingly. And what we see is after they get buried, Ananias and Sapphira, Acts goes on to tell us how many miracles were worked by the apostles as they went about spreading the gospel. And this, of course, angers the high priest and the Sadducees. And they start to imprison these guys, imprison the apostles who then are freed at night by an angel and told to go preach in the temple. And then, of course, the following day, they're quietly brought to trial, strongly admonished for preaching the gospel throughout Jerusalem when they had been told explicitly to be silent. And we say, look, I mean, we must obey God rather than men, they're told. And both or bold words from apparently unpowerless or what would uneducated men. Talk about that a little bit.
well, this is what the Holy Spirit allows us to do. He gives us the words to speak when and where we need to speak them. This does not mean we are not going to suffer. Acts tells us that the high priest and his cohort were enraged and wanted to kill the apostles when they said this. Then one of their colleagues, Gamaliel, intervenes and advises them otherwise. Still, they flogged the apostles before letting them go. This does not stop the apostles. In fact, they rejoice that they are counted worthy to suffer for what they are doing. We have a lot to learn here. I mean, just by trying hard to live the gospel at work, by living the virtues we have learned or been taught, we are going to enrage others who are not happy with our trying. They would prefer that we not struggle to be truthful and good at work, since it casts judgment upon their own behavior or threatens their monetary agenda. I mean, once again, in the white paper I wrote, I recall the incident where I was interviewing for a supply chain management position at a Boston hospital. When I told the headhunter I could not in good conscience purchase supplies that were used exclusively for abortions, and there were some items that were used exclusively for abortions, he flew into a rage and said, don't bring that up. Just in the interview with the client, he told me, just take the job. I can still hear him yelling, take the job. They like you, and deal with that later. But dealing with it later would have been very difficult. The headhunter would have been gone with his fee in the bank, and I would have been left there with nothing, alone, trying to sort this out. So this is what is meant by going against the grain. We can easily lose out by being witnesses to the truth. We should not complain. Rather, we should rejoice that we were found worthy to suffer for the faith, as the apostles did. It is easy to speak about it like we're speaking on this podcast, but it's very hard to do it in the moment. And that's why we need to support one another in our efforts. We do this through prayer and encouragement, and we don't want to neglect each other, and we want to help each other, because if you're out there, you're going to go through it.
We see as we move on to the sixth chapter of the Acts, we see the church starting to grow, and we see the establishment of some institutions, such as the role of a deacon in the church, and really a great number of multiplication of many of the disciples in Jerusalem. And of course, with that, so all that seems great, but we also start to add what seems to be layers of management. And I don't know, I mean, is there a risk here?
Most certainly. I mean, whenever layers of management are added and one is removed further from the front lines, there is always a risk of losing touch with one's audience and not serving them effectively. Having the right structure is not the solution. Having the right people is. We need to learn this in the church as well as in corporate. I mean, we know in corporate, right? We know how stifling a bad boss can be, one who micromanages us or takes credit for all of our ideas and accomplishments. Well, the same can happen in the spiritual structures in which we live or through which we operate. For example, the parish or the group that forms the community through which we live our faith. We can't suffocate people. They need room to act and take initiative and exercise their freedom. The Holy Spirit is active within these structures because he is active within the souls that are present in them, and not just the structure, but the person.
Mm. So, clearly the creation of deacons is a good thing, and the church can scale and grow with their assistance. And as we move through towards the end of Acts, the sixth chapter, we meet Stephen, and he sounds as though he was very good at his job. I mean, so good. In fact, he becomes the first martyr. And what can we learn from Stephen about how to act in the workplace?
I think we want to be gentle but firm and clear in communicating the truth to others. I mean, Stephen does just that. In the Acts, it says they looked upon Stephen's face and it appeared to be the face of an angel. And so he was clearly a very holy man. I mean, his martyrdom is a sign for us. All genuine holiness leads to martyrdom because it leads to a proclamation of the truth that is so powerful and convincing that the only way for the enemies of God to stop it is to kill the person responsible for it. In the workplace, we need to realize that many will not approve nor like our commitment to live in our Christian faith. It is naive not to realize this. We're calling upon others to change their lives through the mere witness of our lives without saying anything. Many who are embedded in sin will resent us for this. So we should accept the resentment. Do not hold their sin against them. Learn from Stephen. And the two doctors of the church that talk about this that I've read, St. John Henry Newman and St. Alphonse Liguori, and they preach sermons in which they affirm this observation. Wicked men would prefer that no one on earth were seeking and trying to live a holy life. Not only do they want to be wicked, but they don't want anyone to try to be good. So we can't be naive. Being fully fledged Christian is a very dangerous proposition. God will help us as he helped Stephen, but we have to learn from Stephen's example not to be afraid to speak the truth when called upon to do so, even though we are effectively ostracized for it.
Don't you think that our effectiveness in doing this is in what you're describing has a lot to do with the tone in which we conduct ourselves? That we act in a cooperative way. We're a team player. We act in a spirit of joyfulness. There isn't this stridency that is repellent to people. Don't you think that's a big part of it?
Uh, I mean, to some extent, but the beauty of the workplace is that we're a minority. So, you can't get up on your soapbox. You're not controlling the environment. So the environment already dictates that you have to be somewhat submissive,
Hmm.
right? It just does. And that's good. It's good for our humility. But at the same time, we need to speak the truth. So Stephen, if you look at that section in Acts, he starts off being, a very holy, articulate, you know, proclaimer of the truth. And then by the end of it, he kind of turns on them and says, but you guys just denied Christ and you killed him. And it kind of crescendos, right? And that's just because they're pressuring him so much. Uh, and it's not that we're going to get to that level of proclamation in the workplace, but uh, people are just going to be noticeably irritated by the fact that we're trying to live the lives we're trying to live, and we can't be turned off by that. That's the thing, because that struggle is how we become holy. We need that, right? So the Holy Spirit can use that to form us in the image of Jesus. We need to be humbled. We need to be hurt. We need to be carved up. Maybe not martyred, but effectively martyred. And I think if we don't go through that, then we don't become saints. I don't know how we become saints, just kind of living our own life in a comfortable environment where we can just share with everybody our ideas. I don't know how we become saints that way. We need to push back. And that's my view of it. And I think that's what's missing. That's really what's missing, is that we go into these environments and we're thinking, well, nothing apostolic is happening here. But a tremendous amount is happening because you're there and you're bringing Christ into that environment, and you have to share that experience with other people who are doing the same thing, and then they can affirm you and help you not to give it up. Otherwise, all of us are going to be in the parish basement, doing
Yeah.
bake sales. Really,
Right.
really, or doing Bible studies in the parish basement. That's nice. I'm not saying we don't need to know the Bible, but at some point, you got to go out. At some
Yeah.
point, there's
It's really
engagement.
important, a really important point. And I think there's a temptation for a lot of very good, faithful Catholics to
Yeah,
just want to try to uh, retreat into comfortable environments as you're describing them. But you're right. I mean, our call is to, yeah, I mean, certainly those are good things, be fortified by those things, but then take what we're getting, the strength we're getting from those, and get out into, different environments and workplaces where, again, we will encounter some hostility and tension and a lot of other of those considerations that you just described. So maybe a final thought here, Mark, before we wrap it up.
well, I would just encourage people not to abandon those spaces, and that's really what this whole podcast is about, right? I mean, we're not, you go to mass in the parish to hear a homily, and you go, and the priest preaches that very well, hopefully. And this is not our canonical mission to kind of preach, but it is our mission to help each other not abandon the space that God's asked us to go into to evangelize, and that's the workplace.
Yeah, that's
And we
great.
and we have to help each other not abandon that. And we have to actually realize this is where all the action is happening. This is where the conversions are happening, but it won't happen if you're not there. If you're not there, God has no one, he has no team, he has no player there.
Mm-hmm,
You know
mm-hmm,
what I mean? He's not just going to appear himself. He wants Peter Buckley to be there, you know, Mark O'Donnell to be there, whoever,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and then he can act. And in that process, you're sanctified, I'm sanctified because we're beat up. And,
mm-hmm.
and at some point, who knows, we could, we could lose a job. I mean, I've lost 3 jobs just because of, in the interview process, people found out that I was, trying to live a really committed life to become a saint, and they didn't think I'd fit in. And they were probably right, which is weird, but at the same time, it hurts. It's like, well, I'm good at this. Why can't I just do this strategy job? Well, you probably could, but I don't know what you're going to talk to the CEO about at the airport when you miss your flight and you're there for 4 hours.
Yeah.
He's going to look at you like, what's going on? I mean,
yeah.
So it's, but I would really encourage people listening to go, not to be afraid, and just to form networking groups where they can get together with others who are doing the same thing and just share simple anecdotes like we've shared today, right? Simple things like that. And then they start to see, okay, I'm in the right place. This is where I need to be. And they share it with their wife, maybe, and their kids. And then their kids realize there's an apostolic dimension to your work. It's not just dad's making money so we can have comfortable lives.
Go to Disney World.
Yeah, go to Disney World.
Well, let's wrap it up there. We'll wrap it up on Mickey Mouse here.
Okay.
Not that anything you said was Mickey Mouse-ish in any way. So thank you again, Mark, for
definitely
really excellent insight and some really good suggestions. And we'll continue with this. We're kind of out of season here with the liturgical calendar, but I think it's good to go through. I mean, we have as our great example the first Christians, and what better way to visit that than to see how they're chronicled in the Acts of the Apostles. So maybe we'll do another episode or 2 of this. But in the meanwhile, thanks for tuning in and listening, and we'll see you again on our next episode of On the Mark.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks for listening to On the Mark with Peter Buckley and Mark O'Donnell. If you enjoy our podcast, be sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify to be notified every time Peter and Mark release a new episode. And visit us on the web at onthemark.show.